Welcome to Coffee Rants with Dan. I am the spiritual anarchist, Dan Arnold, your host. Tune in for what's really happening every Thursday. That's Thursday at 9 a.m. in Studio A on Revolution Radio. They keep us in fear to manipulate us. They want us ignorant so we're easier to enslave. They make us murder one another so they don't have to do it themselves. Only you can break their mind control by hearing the contradictions within your belief systems that allows you to accept their lies in the first place. The time has come for us to remember our divinity, who we really are, to return to what we're meant to be, a service to others, to humanity, to return to nature, and reclaim our birthright, that which is freedom. The truth will sound belligerent because it is in direct opposition to lies. So get angry, because anger is sacred. And together we can unite and rise. Rise from this darkness. Humanity, assemble. And welcome to Thursday morning Coffee Rants with Dan. I am the spiritual anarchist, Dan, your host. You can find me here every Thursday morning at 9 a.m. Studio A, revolution.radio. And I want to start the show off by saying what I think I'm going to say every show. Humanity, assemble. Because we have to assemble to rise from this darkness. We have them outnumbered. So this is the number one listener-supported radio platform in the world. And if you have a little extra, please go to the donations tab and please think about giving. That's what keeps us on the air. Over 70 radio hosts giving you different information than what you're going to get from the mainstream news media. Sometimes it's the same information with a different twist. I'm not saying don't watch the media, but just understand that they're programming you. And as I've been doing this work for 4 or 5 years, let me take a sip of my coffee. With what's currently going on in the world, sometimes I feel like I have an 8-ounce glass of water. And for every podcast I've done, for every radio show I've done, for everything that I've talked about being an ex-order follower, every time I speak out, I feel like I'm going to that Malibu fire in California, and I'm throwing my 8-ounce glass of water on that fire. And sometimes it doesn't feel like I'm doing nothing. And then I got a call from a friend in Chicago. And she was thinking about joining the Marine Corps. But she read my book, Rise from Darkness. She read my book, Violence and Ego, but she read Rise from Darkness. And she was like, thanks to that book,
she decided not to join the Marine Corps, not to join the ranks of order followers. And a lot of what I'm going to talk about today is going to be directly aimed at order followers and the mercenaries that they've really always have been. And we have a different kind of mercenary that we need to worry about nowadays, and they wear white coats. They work under the guise of your health and safety, following medical protocols. And they're bigger order followers than the ones carrying guns because you trust them more. But these are some definite amazing times we're living in. We've got extraterrestrial disclosure. Whatever happened to those giant shadowy figures at Miami Mall this past January, this year? And we never heard nothing else from that. Did their batteries kind of fail? Are they interdimensional? Reality is more fantastical than any science fiction fantasy book ever written, or movie script for that matter. Star Wars is closer to reality than you think. It's definitely closer than what's in the Bible. And I'm going to talk about today. I'm going to also get into some biblical Gnostic texts. I want to talk a little bit about that, and I'm going to talk about the sacred masculine and sacred feminine. It's going to be all rolled up into one show today. And when we start talking about biblical texts, I'm not a religious person in the least bit. I'm spiritual. I'm a spiritual person. And that's what Jesus was trying to teach. I wouldn't even want to mention anything from any religious text. But unfortunately, the 24 books of the Hebrew Bible that were written less than 3,000 years ago are being used as some type of legal document to commit genocide against Palestinians. And I've given my opinion on this before. I personally believe they are the direct descendants of Atlantis, and they've got an Rh negative blood type that's very rare, and their blood type is not as affected by the needlecraft currently going on in the world, which is why they're doing an ethnic cleansing. And now supposedly that dumbass Yahoo, excuse my language, I don't want to, well, this is morning coffee rant. It's not like evening wine with Dan. It's morning coffee rant. I don't want to start getting too angry here, but supposedly there's been a warrant for his arrest. Folks, if we don't start understanding God's natural laws, until we understand those laws, to not initiate harm and to not steal, to live in a level of higher consciousness, we're going to keep being a dog chasing our tail like we have throughout human history over and over again. It makes me, well, let me just get into some other things real quick. I don't want to even keep going on that tip. All I can say is this: the world's on fire and we got them outnumbered. They keep the Middle East at war because the origins of our human history are over there. And if we were to find that out, the world would not be afraid. People in the world would not fear death the way they do now. And all of humanity would stand up and say no to the beings running this soul garden prison planet that we call Earth. Hold on one second. 2023 and 2024 have seen, and I know this from working as a federal law enforcement officer, I know what I'm looking at. I'm surprised there's not more people like me speaking up, more law enforcement officers speaking out, more whistleblowers, more military. They're not. And I'm amazed by it because as a former Lance Corporal in the United States Marine Corps at 19 years old, I really specialized in strippers and beer. And I was trained in the infantry. I know what I'm looking at from a military standpoint. And no one else is speaking out. No other order followers. And it's just amazing to me. But what we've gone through in the last couple of years is what's known as polycrisis. Polycrises. And the definition refers to the accumulation of compounding crises that human societies are facing. It arises when concurrent, this is the actual working definition, it arises when concurrent shocks and interconnected risks combine to create a crisis even worse than the sum of its parts. A polycrisis is not just a situation where multiple crises are coinciding, but one where the crises become even more dangerous than each disaster or emergency on their own. It's a series of crises occurring at the same time. This is how they come at you. This is how psyops work. One thing after another. They don't want to give anyone a chance to catch their breath. They want to keep you vibrating in a state of fear. When you're in a state of fear, you can't formulate any responses because all you're doing is reacting. And they want to keep you in that fearful reaction. They feed off this loose energy. I'm taking a sip of my morning turpentine here. And law enforcement officers right now are being forced to stand down. Okay. What happened in East Palestine, Ohio with that train wreck? What happened with the boat in Baltimore hitting the bridge? How about the 95 to 100 factory chemical plants that, have caught on fire? None of the stuff's being investigated. Every fire department has a criminal investigator for arson. They go through the police academy to be able to do that. Plus, police, organizations, law enforcement organizations generally help. They're not being allowed to investigate these things. They're being told to stand down, and they're standing down. In 2020, when we had all the riots going on, when the police were told to stand down, they stood by and people got hurt and property got destroyed. When they said, no, stop this, there was a lot of violence. So to my order followers, I'm not against you, I'm for you, but you're going to have to stop following immoral orders. And inaction is an action. So if you're not taking the right action to prevent this, you're not protecting. It's very important. Now they're being put on stand down, and I've seen this firsthand myself because I tried initiating some investigations, and it wouldn't have made the agency look good. And I made some enemies because of it, and that didn't help me. But that led me to an early retirement. That led me to where I'm at right now. Before I go on, I'm going to read something. I'm going to read the afterword from my book, Rise from Darkness. Who are they? It's my story on from going from spiritual bankruptcy to spiritually awakened. It can be found on Amazon. It's called Rise from Darkness by me, Daniel Arnold. And I'm going to read the afterword. I'm going to get through the afterword kind of quick here because I got something else I got to read from a friend of mine that I think you guys will, really dig. But, okay, I'm going to start reading. When I first began this book in August of 2018 and titled it Rise from Darkness, Who Are They? I had no idea what the synchronistic significance of the title would really become. COVID-19 and the New World Agenda changed that, breaking from reading. I finished the book in 2020 during the lockdowns and during the early summer. Okay, continuing. So who are they then? A better question in the world right now would be who, as in WHO, are they? Wink, wink. They are the power brokers of this world who understand natural law and how to bypass natural law's effects through their understanding of occulted knowledge. They accomplish this through manipulating others to carry out their desired actions for them. In this manner, the action takers or the order followers become the recipients of the negative consequential effects of ultimately what is their own chosen actions, their own karma. There's a reason why numerous order followers, such as police and military, end up with so many unhealthy coping mechanisms. because we are all human and instinctively know that following orders is innately wrong. We end up at war within ourselves, many times becoming spiritually bankrupt and morally corrupted. We fall into darkness. Often, people become even more ashamed by actions not taken. This is important. If you're told to stand down, don't stand down. Do your job. Do the job that you took an oath to do, which is to protect. Forget the serve part, because you're serving immoral politicians. There's something else I wanted to say, but it eluded me, so I'm just going to continue. Put simply, they are satanic puppeteers who want to play God in our lives. Because in the end, they are not God. They will not grow. They will not win over God, the Lord of Spirits. The truth of our paths is acknowledging that truth is not ours or subjective in nature. It just simply is truth. No person has a right to rule over or govern another person's life. All government is coercive and ruled by greed and ego, whose pundits mindlessly follow their chosen political deities with a religious fever without realizing they are all hypocrites when trying to force their version of freedom on others, where being the side that is more right and therefore legitimate is more important than true discernment. True discernment, pick the lesser of two evils. You're still picking evil. You're still playing their game. You're still consenting. This is why I've said in the past, I'm not reading right now. This is why I've said in the past, I've had people, when they couldn't fit me into one of their political boxes because I don't vote, and they listen to my views. This is especially when I was in law enforcement. They say, "Oh, you're a constitutionalist. Oh, you're libertarian. You're a constitutionalist." No, I'm a human being. I am a soul with the spark of the divine within me, having a physical human experience. And I'm not a constitutionalist, because the Constitution is something I would wipe my ass with. I've said this before, and I'll say it again. I do not need some human being scribbling down on a piece of paper what my rights are and handing them to me, another human being saying, "Here are your rights." And as far as it goes, the Constitution isn't being adhered to anyway. We've lost our First Amendment right. Where they want to take our Second Amendment rights. First Amendment, the right to free speech. Second Amendment, the right to bear arms to protect yourself for self-defense. Fourth Amendment, right from, right to privacy. I forgot to give a disclaimer. I'm living in a small apartment now in this huge building. I really miss my house in the woods. And they're going to be coming in to inspect at some point. I put a note on the door asking them to come back after 10. But if they happen to barge in, there's my disclaimer. That could happen on live radio. So, where did I leave off at? All right, the truth of this is that moral relativism will continue to breed arbitrary legislation from versions of government that will ultimately be immorally enforced with the use of force, with the use of violence by men with guns. It has been demonstrated over and over again throughout human history that freedom in any society increases with morality and decreases into slavery with immorality. I do not think it, and when I say this, some people are going to think they think that morals are like subjective to some time frame or to different ethnicities or different cultures. Morals, traditions are morals. They're getting traditions and morals confused. God has already written into the fabric of reality what is actually moral and what is not moral, and that comes from knowing your rights, and your rights are an action that does not initiate harm against another sentient being. Literally anything else you do that does not initiate harm to another sentient being through coercion, through violence, through theft, is your right to do. You know how many people went to prison for smoking a green leaf? I wonder how they feel now after spending X amount of time in prison, and they made it legal everywhere. So I do not think it's so much as to find truth in my path, as it is to find a path not filled with so much contradicting ridiculousness, or a path of more patience, which is what the prudence of wisdom dictates. We can never truly win our freedom without a global paradigm shift in consciousness. I would add to this that wisdom isn't so much the presence of knowledge as it is the absence of bullshit. With the transhumanism agenda, with the population coal and control agenda, the smart cities and everything else going on, they want to get us to a level 1 civilization inorganically without us first meeting the requirement of a higher level of consciousness where we don't initiate harm or try to enforce our will upon others. Basically, they're wanting to keep us enslaved, which has been part of the human condition since 5000 BCE and even before that. Both major political party followers accept the legitimacy of slavery while allowing themselves to be divided, deceived, and forced to fight one another over whose version of slavery is more righteous. With regard to the scamdemic, I know I have work to do to get better on my delivery, but understand the truth can sometimes sound like a blanket statement if not put forth tactfully, and it often tends to come across as being combative. Sometimes, though, truth must be combative when it is in direct opposition to lies. I believe our egos always seek a way out, which is why most people cannot accept blanket statements. I understand that some blanket statements do come from a place of ignorance, hate, and extreme biases, but not this one. Governments lie and are filled with corruption. Blanket statement, no yeah buts needed. We collectively have been socially engineered since childhood to accept belief systems with contradicting principles. Everything from religious interpretations to applications of man-made laws. I think people need to start examining the yeah buts quantifiers in their contentions, because those quantifiers accept the veracity of whatever is being stated about the subject at hand while also trying to counter it with their version of being the better solution, in this case, their version of government and their yeah but. This is purely egoic. Another blanket statement. What we all have just experienced in the COVID-19 scamdemic was not freedom at all. Both sides resorted to ridiculous extremes for political bullshit, while the people they supposedly served are the ones who suffered. This is not accidental. I think a more measured, reasonable response to a virus, if this was even indeed legit, with no agenda attachments, would have been to protect those persons at high risk, which still allows for those not at high risk to maintain their income, business, and way of life. Breaking from reading. Keep in mind, I'm reading this 4 years later. I wrote this in 2020. All right, continuing. The exact same dynamic can be seen when looking at the religion of political affiliations. The Abrahamic religions of Christianity and Islam and Judaism always are at each other's throats, either literally or metaphorically. And for what? To be right? Here comes another blanket statement. They are all wrong. There is something seriously amiss about all this that has nothing to do with who the next rich guy in charge is going to be. That was not a blanket statement, only my opinion, but one based on a very intimate experiences. Because when I worked for the government, I watched them weaponize law enforcement against their political rivals. Meanwhile, real victims aren't being served, or real crimes aren't being investigated. So religious political followers are blinded by the need to see their side win. This is not a football game. Our lives and freedom are at stake. One more blanket statement. The haves will keep the have-nots fighting each other and fighting their wars, and collectively, we will do nothing about it if we cannot first put aside our egoic political lenses we filter our opinions through. On social media platforms, all critical thought has been either lost altogether by political fanatics or ridiculed and shamed for the sake of the religion of their political affiliations. I do not think running beliefs or opinions through political party filters is primarily conscious or intelligent. Part of helping others rise out of darkness will be to teach this. We will have to work together to educate others about natural law, true spirituality, higher consciousness, if we are to ever be totally free of the dark occultist mind controllers keeping humanity enslaved. Watching friends become hostile with each other, triggered over who they want their next slave master in chief to be, is disheartening. Our world can never and will never have fairness, which can be subjective anyway, without first having true objective freedom with a cessation of moral relativism. There is no version of freedom. There's simply freedom or slavery. Breaking. Folks, we're slaves. We're slaves. It's just covert. And they're trying to just get it over. They don't even care about people speaking against them now at this point. That seems to be how far gone we all are as a species, but we still have time. We have time to come back from this. Continuing, we must help others rise from darkness and help them to return to the light. This can only be truly accomplished by changing the hearts and minds of humanity about what true freedom really is. Any coercive means to accomplish this or any other goal would be in opposition to natural law and would thus fail. Only through true care for each other and a development of the spirit of and for voluntarism is how we as a species are meant to live. This would be true anarchy. Indeed, it would be spiritual anarchy. Stay safe in these times, my friends. I feel that it is only a test. This is what I wrote back then. I feel that this was only a test run. When all is said and done, we will say where the chips have fallen. 4 years later, it was a test run. I'm going to read a quote by Steve Maraboli. The victim mindset dilutes the human potential. By not accepting personal responsibility for our circumstances, we greatly reduce our power to change them. There was a person by the name of Viktor Frankl. He survived the Nazi death camps in Auschwitz, Germany. While many people might call him a victim of circumstances, Dr. Frankl defined freedom in a very intriguing way. To choose one's attitude in any given set of circumstances is to choose one's way in life. Frankl also suggested between stimulus and response, there is a space. In that space is our power to choose our response. In our response lies our growth and our freedom. I've only got one more part that I want to read, because as I said, I was going to talk about, the roles of the sacred masculine, the roles of the sacred feminine, when they're trying to obfuscate both. And this is directed at the ladies, because what they do when they want to attack a society is the first thing they do is they attack women. They attack women because if they can mind control women, the women will control the men. Women have great influence on men, all men, but especially good men. And if the women are getting their men to stand down, who's going to defend them? Because I guarantee you that the wolves that are at the gate are going to be very, very toxically masculine. And what's going to happen if we have no men who have these masculine qualities to actually stand up and use force and fight and protect? I wrote this in the book. It says, ladies, you are far more powerful than I ever truly understand. Use that power and wield it in celebration of gender differences. You are the mothers of the earth, and your collective influences are sorely needed. So, that's the rest I'm going to read out of the book. I have a friend that wrote something that perfectly encapsulates what I've been talking about with order followers, and what I was talking about with what I've talked about in the past with the role of the sacred masculine, the role of the sacred feminine. And I think I'm going to read it right now. Let me get to it. So as I said, I'm not the author of this, but the warrior that wrote this was never a cop like me. He was never a SWAT team member like me or a military commando. This was written and posted on Facebook by Logan Hart of the Wizard Factory, and it's warrior poetry to me. So here we go. The warrior archetype has taken on a highly manipulated form, shaped by the social engineers which misleads men off the path of anything which might become a threat to the control system. Firstly, it has come to represent being a minion of the state, an obedient order follower, ready to mindlessly dominate and destroy anything their masters point at with a single command. Breaking for a second. As I read this, I'm going to give some of my own analysis. Anything that leads men off the path of anything which might become a threat to the control system. This is why they attack the women, to get the women to influence the men, and this is why there's also a war on testosterone. Continuing, a product of the slave system, the perfect killing machine, propped up and idolized by false virtue. Obedience is not a virtue. And naive glorification by the unwitting masses, the second distortion of the satanic self-servant. One who acts only in his own interest, with no creed or code beyond personal survival and gain, solipsism, relativism, and authoritarianism. I'm not doing this for the money. Nobody who does this work does it for the money. You know, the guy with the capital G, source consciousness, which could encapsulate both the masculine and feminine. That's something most people don't want to even think about. They always refer to God as a he. I'm going to continue. So a mercenary, the godless tyrant who sees everything and everyone as the opponent, as a product of scarcity mindset. It's them or me. It's a dog-eat-dog world. I do whatever it takes to survive. I don't trust anyone, and I only need myself. I'll stop at nothing to get to the top. And it's tragic, and it's tragic and doomed form of existence. It ignores and desecrates the law of one. These are not warriors. They are traitors and cowards, slaves to themselves and to their base desires. So now that we've eliminated those false concepts of warriorhood from my intended message, let's characterize what I do mean. To me, the warrior has three facets, three missions, which ultimately are all extensions of the same motive, the same driving force, agape, cosmic love. The first of these is service to self. But wait, didn't I just describe that is also one of the distortions? Yes, but this is different. Let me explain the nuance. In this context, the warrior understands that he is no use to anyone or anything if he is destroyed. He must keep himself alive and in optimal state in order to fulfill his higher mission. By the way, I'm using he, his, because even though the warrior is not gender exclusive, it is a masculine archetype. In a healed world, there would be no need or interest for women to embody this. But this path is inherently baked into a man's DNA. It is deeply a part of his instinctual identity and purpose. Women adopt this out of a wounding and perceived necessity, but that is also another conversation. So, the warrior must protect and honor himself deeply. Spirituality is all about autonomy and sovereignty. This means developing and calibrating healthy boundaries between yourself and others and being willing to unapologetically defend those lines. Being a strong warrior doesn't just mean you have a high tolerance for abuse. It means you have a high level of self-respect, a natural byproduct of extensive personal development, self-discipline, and shadow work. And I've said this before, I'm breaking from reading. That's a garden you got to go back to and weed from time to time. Continuing. This goes well beyond egoic pride. It's about self-love and self-care, knowing and living in your divine royalty. It's about remembering who the fuck you are. Do no harm, but take no shit. The second mission of the warrior is service to others. Not in a Jesus kind of, get involved in everyone's business, spiritual warfare, savior of the world kind of way. In fact, one of the most loving things you can do for someone is to allow them to feel the sting of their own consequences. The warrior respects the path, journey, and autonomy of others. This includes their karma. What we're trying to do is help people avoid that. But if they're not bringing harm to anyone else but themselves, let them learn the hard way, like I did. Continuing. So what he's saying here is, I'm talking about defending others against bullies, abusers, and tyrants, defending the meek, the weak and infirm, the innocent, the truly helpless, especially women and children. Call me old-fashioned. And it's about giving a damn about the injustices happening in this world, even when it doesn't directly affect you. The third and highest mission is service to truth. The previous two are merely extensions of this one. Some say that truth doesn't need to be defended. Bullshit. Look around you. Look at the state of the world. The truth has no voice of its own. It's our job to speak it. Truth is self-evident, but not to the blind and arrogant. Truth is at war with arrogance and evil. Breaking it for a second. That kind of goes right in line with what I wrote in my book. Truth is going to come across as belligerent because it is in direct opposition to lies. Truth is at war with arrogance and evil. It is disembodied. We must embody it. We must fight for it. The sword and gun are not the only ways to do battle. It is in our daily thoughts, words, and actions that this battle is won. A hot war is only the final resort when all else has failed. This war is one of the mind, not the body, though neither can function without the other. The light of truth must be recognized and understood for it to benefit our human experience. Truth is not only what is true, but what is right, especially what is right. Moral truth is the highest truth. A warrior is, at his core, one who acts courageously for virtue, for what is right, regardless of the cost. One who does what is necessary to resist evil and uphold and preserve goodness in the world. One directed by divine inspiration and moral principles. This is his foundation. It is only through true principles and virtue can the warrior be of service to himself, others, and goodness. Without them, he is lost and is more danger than an ally. We serve and act not by fear, but by duty and care. And I would add discernment. Because what we got going on coming up in the world is no one's going to know who's the enemy. They want that kind of confusion. Discernment's going to be very important. On my deathbed, that's all that came to me is love and discernment. Only love and discernment can drive out hate and fear. Continuing, we do not relish in conflict, but act as the restorers and preservers of peace. We do not seek drama, nor wish for calamity. We do not enjoy inflicting pain and suffering, nor instigate bloodshed for its own sake. We are moved by love, not hatred. We are inspired by the goodness of care, who lives in our fiery hearts. Breaking for a second. If I ever go out to fight the evil in this world, I'm not doing it to fight what's in front of me. I'm doing it to protect what's behind me. That's what a true warrior does. A true warrior doesn't act on violent urges. Don't get me wrong. There's been times, this is me personally, I feel like punching somebody right in the mouth just because they've talked some shit they shouldn't be talking. And I think if that happened more often, people would realize, A, we're not all that fragile, and B, quit being passive aggressive. And violence usually starts with words. Continuing, we train and prepare not because we are afraid, but because we recognize that evil exists and freedom is fragile and fleeting, that peace and love are being trampled by domination and subjugation. And we refuse to allow, to tolerate, to accept that. We recognize that we are the heroes we've been waiting for. We will answer the call to seek truth and speak truth, to defend what is right and good, and to banish evil wherever we see it. Despite what cowards and gaslighters the megalomaniac monsters want you to believe, I tell you this, the more warriors, not mercenaries, not tyrants, but true warriors that exist in the world, the more peaceful it would be. This was from Logan Hart. He's got a podcast called The Wizard Factory on, you just type that in. I highly recommend his work. It resonated with me. I've said the same things just in different ways. I can tell you from being an ex-cop, having been in the Marine Corps, having done all these order following jobs that I got out of, of my own accord in 2015 under good terms, this really hit me. Because if you're doing a job and you're just saying, hey, I'm just doing my job, but what you're doing is taking away someone's rights, that's immoral to do. And just doing your job is not going to cut it. So I want to go right into something from the book of Thomas, because this is kind of important. Jesus, whether you believe in the allegorical Jesus or in the historical person, was an enlightened being, a prophet, trying to, at that time, give the truth of existence and morality to the people he was around. Bear in mind that as we translated these books 3,000 years later, 2,000 years later, it was from different languages. So a lot that's in the Gnostic text is still written biblically. But what they're saying, there's a reason why they weren't included. The reason they were found where they were found is because they start to give you an idea of what Jesus was trying to teach. Okay, I'm going to read this and then I'll give you my little interpretation. Okay, and this is from the Lost Book of Thomas. And he said, whoever finds the interpretation of these sayings will not experience death. Thomas said to Jesus, Master, my mouth is wholly incapable of saying whom you are like. Jesus said, I am not your master. Because you have drunk, you have become intoxicated from the bubbling spring, which I have measured out. And then he took Thomas, he took him and withdrew him and told him three things. And when Thomas returned to his companions, they asked him, what did Jesus say to you? And Thomas said to them, if I tell you even one thing which he told me, you will pick up stones and throw them at me. So Jesus said to him, let him who seeks continue seeking until he finds. When he finds, he will become troubled. When he becomes troubled, he will become astonished, and he will rule over the all. What he was trying to say there. Well, let me continue this. Hold on. I'll give you the whole thing. Jesus said, if those who lead you say to you, see, the kingdom is in the sky, then the birds of the sky will precede you. If they say to you, it is in the sea, then the fish will precede you. Rather, the kingdom is inside of you, and it is outside of you. When you come to know yourselves, then you will become known, and you will realize that it is you who are the sons of the living Father. But if you will not know yourselves, you dwell in poverty, and it is you who are that poverty. What Jesus was saying there is we all have the spark, the divine spark of God within us. We are all fragmentation of source consciousness, experiencing, trying to remember who we are. That's something that they didn't want to happen because they want to play God on this planet. They don't want us to return to light. See, God is experiencing, we have free will, and God is experiencing and growing through our experiences here. And when we pass from this 3D reality, we return back to the light. I died twice. Light was involved. And if we were made in God's image, that image is pure light. It is conscious, but we have free will for a reason. So in a sense, to seek is to already find. Otherwise, how could we ever have the idea to search? How could we be propelled by this desire unless it were for something that we somehow already know? Surely we have all had moments in our lives that testify to this, moments of discovering the light, if only from a distant star, that had always been there in the darkest of nights. That light is within you. That light is within me. This is why we are all one. That is the law of one. John the Baptist wrote, "You would not seek me if you not already found me." Thus, the essential movement of the quest is genuine, opening to what is already here. But we do not know it enough. It is your very center. There is something you do not recognize, said John the Baptist to his disciples. In our very core, there is a presence that needs to be recognized and affirmed. Seeking/finding means being more and more open to the gift that has already been ours. This next part I wrote, simply put, we are all gods of God. To initiate harm to others is to harm ourselves. Essentially, Jesus was teaching what he knew of the true nature of God and the natural law set forth in creation. Then religious-minded, controlled zealots tortured and attempted to murder him for it. There seems to be an easily seen repeated pattern of this throughout our shared human history. Then they make a religion, which Jesus was against, out of what they purposely complicated it and complicated his teachings to confuse and keep you fighting and bickering over the minutia and low-hanging fruit. The gift that has always been ours, because it is also God's gift, is freedom. When Jesus said he was a king, what he was saying is we are all sovereign. Birthright is our freedom. We are all sovereign. This is something that they don't want you to know. They get you accepting their authority if you play their game by voting, if you play their game by listening to what they tell you to do, if you stay in a state of fear, you're playing right into their hands. You're almost, it's like I've given this before, it's like the allegory of a vampire. The vampire knocks at the door and asks permission to enter. It cannot cross that threshold until you give it permission to enter. Once you give it permission to enter, it feeds on you. And since you've given consent, it's implied consent for future feedings. Our lack of action is their consent. We're giving our consent through our lack of action because they are required to let us know what they're going to do. And they're letting us know ahead of time every day on the news what they're going to do. They've declassified all this information about extraterrestrials, and they used to send disinformation agents to every single crash site throughout the 50s and 60s. 1959, when there was a global scare of nuclear, we had already dropped atomic bombs in Japan. That sent shockwaves through different realities, not just ours. And they've already released this information. It's been declassified by the CIA. At one point in time, extraterrestrials shut down every nuclear power plant in the world, and that's when they did the famous flyby of the Capitol to let us know, hey, we're here, we're watching. We're not gonna have this. I highly recommend following Dr. Stephen Greer's work and his CE5 protocol, which helps in meditation and leading to a higher level of consciousness. I don't agree with everything. I think there is at least one faction of a certain extraterrestrial entity, being, I should say, that does not mean us well. I don't think it's ever even left this planet personally, but I'm being a conspiracy analyst now. So, he's right when he says that they don't mean us harm, that they're higher conscious beings that won't harm us, or they're completely just neutral to us. And what they're going to stage pretty soon, Project Bluebeam and Blue Book, is going to be a fake alien invasion with reverse engineer technology that we've had since Roswell. He's right on all that. My only little disagreement is I think there is one faction of them that does not dig us at all. There's something trying to control us. I don't have all the answers, but I know that the answer is never going to come from government. The answer is never going to come from enslavement. If in the microcosm of our lives, we're trying to impose our will, be violent, and commit theft in any way, that's what's getting put out into the macrocosm of the world. And all governments do is put out violence and theft into the collective, and it's being mirrored right back at us in the form of our enslavement and with what's coming now. I said this before, this isn't human driven. Beings that live for millions of years, if not immortal, 3,000 years is a drop in the bucket to them. Imagine advanced mathematics and technology. They know exactly what's going on now. This year was crazy with all the supermoons. All this stuff was written about. This was all put into prophecy. This is Thursday. If I want to give you a prophecy about what I'll be doing on Saturday or Sunday, I can then give that prophecy and then make those things occur. That's all that's happening right now. That is my serious feeling on what's going on in the world. Well, we're coming up on the end here. Pretty soon I'm going to have Psychic Sonia Hortzman on as a guest. We'll be doing a lot of talking about cryptids and extraterrestrials. We've had these encounters. She's had a whole bunch of them. She's as legit as they come. She's called everything that's happened in the last couple of years well ahead of time, and it's almost frightening. But anyway, until next week, man, stay safe. Love everybody. Peace.